Let's see if this makes it significantly lag more than it is already lagging when I just hit record. All right. Now I'm officially welcoming you to your DNA Guide, the webinar with our special guest, Shenley Puterbaugh. I hope I said that right. You can say it again later more correctly if you want to. As I was just chatting with some of you who are already online, I'm super excited about tonight. I'm excited to have a partner in crime. This whole hosting your own webinar thing has been such a fun adventure for me, and I'm finding myself having even more fun tonight, not being in charge really, and getting to turn the mic over to someone else and learn for myself all these things that I've wanted to learn about what's actually happening in the research. I love data. I love knowing that there's people out there who are doing research studies to validate what we're doing with our lives. Somehow that's, I mean, does a banker really get that? I don't think so. So we're very lucky that there's research out there to support what we're doing. So the format of tonight will be, I am going to turn the time over to Shenley and she will share her screen. But before that, she'll share her video and introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her background and how she ended up running Inspire Family History. And after she gives a little brief introduction of her background, then she will share her thoughts with us tonight, all the things that she's learned. And after that, we'll do some Q&A. And like all the webinars in the past, we will be recording this session and we will be sending out that recording on Friday. We are repeating the session on Thursday. If you miss out or you have some technical trouble tonight, you can always come back on Thursday and listen again. And yeah, so everybody will get the recording on Friday. You can watch it again for a week. So that's all the announcements, people. Let's get to some learning. So I'm going to share, or I'm going to turn this over to Shenley.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this webinar. I'm so excited to be here with you and to be able to share with you the studies that show the incredible benefits of doing family history. A lot of you are probably already doing family history, so you see those benefits in your lives and you maybe see them in others, but actually having the science and the studies and the research behind it is really helpful. And so I hope it's helpful for you, and I'm really excited to share it with you. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am the founder of Inspire Family History. I started doing family history about 17 years ago, and what got me really into it and really excited about it was when I went to visit my grandparents. I spent a week with each set of grandparents, and I was able to, let's see. All right, since it says that there's no video, I'm going to screen share so we can have a little bit of background. But I was able to spend a week with each set of my grandparents, and we were able to go through old boxes and find documents and pictures, and I was able to spend time interviewing them and record their life stories. We were able to go visit places that were significant in their lives, as well as the lives of their parents and grandparents and ancestors. And from that trip, I came back with around 1,000 names to add to my family tree, which was incredible. Not a lot had been done as in my family in terms of a family tree, but obviously my grandparents had a lot of information to pass on to somebody, and I was the one who was fortunate enough to get those and get that information and be able to put together a family tree. So that was a really incredible and priceless experience that really motivated me with family history and got me so excited and really lit the fire for me. So for the last 17 years, I've been doing my own family history, but over time, I found so much joy in sharing my family history with others, with my family, sharing my findings with friends, and just seeing their excitement and getting other people excited about it. And so I've come up with a lot of ideas and resources and tools that make up Inspire Family History. They're all on the website, and they're for other people to use to either get inspired themselves or to use those tools and ideas and resources to inspire others. So that is a little bit about Inspire Family History and about how I got into family history. If in the comment bar, I would love for you to write what benefits you have seen in your life from family history. And later on, maybe we'll read some of those comments. I experienced a lot of benefits from really connecting with my grandparents and my ancestors, and I was able to better understand myself and better understand my parents and my grandparents. And so it really gave me a great sense of who I am in a deeper way. So today we're going to start, we're going to talk about 4 different studies today that show the benefits that can come from family history. The first study we're going to talk about is by Martha Droznick. She was a professor at the Oregon Health and Science University, and her study was called "Who Are You From? The Importance of Family Stories." Martha worked at a hospital, and she worked with a lot of people who were going through difficult experiences. And so her research was based on her patients and what she experienced with her patients. So her focus in her research was on the internal, which is genetic, and the external, which is family stories in building resilience during stress, illness, and disease. So that was her focus. And I really love the title of her study, "Who Are You From?" So often when we meet people, we focus on where are you from or where am I from? We focus on genetic heritage. And I love learning about cultures and countries. I studied international cultural studies in college, so I love cultures and places. But what she's proposing is, why not think more about who you are from, or think about it as much, if not more, than where we are from. So who are you from? Who am I from? These are people. The people that we come from make up who we are. And their story is really our story. So learning about those people can be incredibly beneficial to our lives and our families' lives. Now, I'm going to share a little bit of trivia with you about how many ancestors we have. Okay, so think about how many. Make a guess, don't do the math, just quickly guess how many ancestors or how many people go from you all the way back to your 5th great grandparents. You can type your answer in the comment box if you'd like. We'll see what some of the guesses are. Okay, so the answer from you all the way back to your 5th great grandparents directly is 254 people. Now we're going to talk about from you all the way back to your 10th great grandparents. Directly back to your 10th great grandparents, there's 8,190 people that make up you. And if you go even further back, it just grows exponentially with every generation. So let me put this into perspective a little bit. So 8,190 people. If you line that many people up single file, we're not talking social distancing single file. We're talking about normal standing in line single file. It would go, the line for 8,190 people would go 3 miles. My family and I recently did a hike into the mountains. So it was a lot of terrain and we took breaks, but it took us 2 hours to hike for 3 miles. So if you think about that, if you're going along a single file line, meeting these people, just shaking their hand for a second or actually having a conversation, think about how long that would take you to get to know these people. That's 8,190 people from you all the way back to your 10th great grandparents. Okay, so these people make up you, make up who you are. Now back to the research. Yep, there's a line. So Martha's focused on reminiscing. Reminiscing is thinking about your past experiences. So in her research, she found that reminiscing has been associated with improved psychological well-being, reduced feelings of loneliness and depression, finding meaning in life, and improved mood and life satisfaction. When she added family stories to reminiscing, family stories being positive and negative family stories, when she added, so reminiscing plus family stories has been associated with improved self-esteem, enhanced feelings of control and mastery over life as one ages, and coming to grips with life, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So her conclusion was that knowing one's family stories creates meaning that goes beyond the individual to provide a sense of self through time and in relation to family. This expanded sense of self is referred to as our intergenerational self, which not only grounds an individual, but also provides a larger context for understanding and dealing with life's experiences and challenges. This connection across generations appears to contribute to resilience at all stages of life. So notice she says resilience at all stages of life. Resilience, as defined in the Oxford Dictionary, is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. That's a pretty powerful benefit because all of us, every single person, experiences difficulties in life. That's just part of life. So having resilience and being able to bounce back and recover quickly from difficulties is an incredible benefit. And as you'll see through the studies that I share with you today, as well as other studies that have been done on the benefits of family history or genealogy, is that resilience is really a theme. Almost every study I've seen has mentioned resilience as a benefit. And Ron Brezel, who is the founder of and executive director of Psychological and Educational Services in Maine, he says that resilient people actually resist illness, cope with adversity, and recover quicker because they are able to maintain a positive attitude and manage their stress effectively. So the benefits go beyond just emotional or mental benefits. It's actually physical benefits from being resilient. Okay, so we are going to pause here, and if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to take a few questions. Let's see, Diane. Okay.
Yep, we're going to see if we've got any.
What'd you say? Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say we were waiting to see if we have any questions.
Oh, okay. Did anybody comment with benefits from that they've experienced from family history?
Definitely. So we had John say that he's developed a love of local history and the stories that were the lives of his ancestors. Danya says understanding her family's struggles and what they did to better their lives has really helped her. Allison said she connected with a second cousin in England where she'd never connected with that side of the family before, and she's now really looking forward to meeting them in a year or so.
That's great.
We had Katie, who said she works in the genealogy division at the Indiana State Library, and she speaks to so many patrons whose lives have been positively changed by doing their family history. There's so much more understanding of how we're all connected as people, and so much wonder. Every time somebody comments, I lose my place. Wonder and awe of how people got through difficult times in history. So there's a lot of really great. Janice says she's always been interested in family history, but found that doing it after her parents died was really therapeutic. Barbara's met lots of her cousins in England. She loves learning about local history and neighbors. And yeah, there's been so many good experiences.
That's great. Thank you, everybody, for sharing those. It always lifts me up to hear what other people are experiencing too from family history. So we'll move on now to the next study. This is probably the most common study that people have heard about in regards to family history. It was done by Robin Favush, Marshall Duke, and Jennifer Bohanek from Emory University. They're all in the psychology department. And it's titled, Do You Know? The Power of Family History and Adolescent Identity and Well-Being. If you have already heard about this, you've probably only heard about a part of the study, but there's actually 3 parts to this study. So hopefully you'll hear something new. So the study was started they wanted to observe dinner table conversations in families. So they picked 66 families, and they were all random, all from different backgrounds, 66 families, and they observed their dinner conversations. And what they found was that all families discuss their day-to-day life. They share experiences from their days. But not everyone, and some people or some families would share stories from their family. They would share family stories or past family stories. And the families that shared family stories, the children had less anxiety, depression, anger, aggression, and acting out. Those are pretty powerful benefits for children, especially. I mean, for anybody, but especially for children. So Marshall Duke, Robin Favush, and Jennifer Bohanek decided to further this study by looking deeper. And they came up with what you call is the Do You Know scale. And what they wanted to do was find the power of family history in adolescent identity and well-being. So this was the Do You Know scale is 20 questions. And included in those questions are, do you know how your parents met? Do you know where your grandparents grew up? Do you know who you look most like in your family? They're all different questions that they asked to the adolescents in these same families from their first study. So they went back to the same families that they listened to with their dinner conversations. And what they found was that the children who scored higher were the same families who told more family stories over a typical dinner conversation. So their findings were that adolescents who report knowing more stories about their familial past showed higher levels of emotional well-being and also higher levels of identity achievement when controlling for general level of family functioning. Some additional benefits that they found were internal control, higher self-esteem, higher reported family function, higher reported family traditions, sense of self-worth, ability to plan for the future, and acceptance of one's self. So those are all benefits that this study showed from doing family history. At this point, they thought that their study was done. But what happened 2 months later changed that. It was the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. And they decided that after this horrible event that so many of us have experienced, that so many of us indirectly experienced, some of us may have directly experienced it, but they decided to further their study by going back to these families and seeing how they were able to cope with the stress of this, because none of the families that they had been interacting with actually were directly affected by the terrorist attacks, but all of the families were affected by the same national trauma. So it was an opportunity for them to further their studies of the effects of knowing family stories. And once again, the ones who knew more about their families were more resilient. They were able to handle the stresses of this experience and uncertainty far better than those who did not know their family's stories. So that was a pretty interesting find. And they were able to be resilient. I'm saying resilient again, as I mentioned earlier. Resilience is a benefit that is shown in almost every study that I found. So we've talked about reminiscing, and we've talked about the importance of knowing family stories. Now we're going to go on to talking about family narratives. So Robin Favush, who was in the previous study as well, she teamed up with Natalie Merrill, and this was done at Emory University again, and they did a study called An Ecological Systems Approach to Family Narratives. Now, family narrative is pretty much family stories, but there's more to a narrative than just the story. A narrative includes thoughts, emotions, motivations, intentions, and evaluations. So what they found is that narratives of others, especially family members, also become a part of our own autobiography and guide our personal future. So narratives are the way that we make sense of life. So they found 3 different types of narratives through their studies. The ascending family narrative is one that goes something like, we had nothing and then we worked hard and now we're successful. The descending family narrative goes something like, we used to have it all and then we lost everything. These might sound familiar because maybe these are narratives that you've heard in your family. The third narrative is the oscillating family narrative. And they found that the oscillating family narrative is the most healthful family narrative. It goes something like, we've had ups and downs. No matter what happened, we always stuck together and we made it through. So oscillating is going up and down. There's ups and downs to your stories. So this actually includes positive family stories and negative family stories. And both types of family stories are important to your family narrative. As others tell their experiences, we understand our own experiences in new ways as well by using others' stories as frames. Okay, so there's positives and negatives, negative types of story that affect us. So from the positive stories, we can be inspired, we can be motivated, we can have examples of things that we want to do or ways that we want to be. But negative family stories help us too. They help us know what not to do, how they made it through, and how they overcame setbacks. Okay, so they also talked about intergenerational narratives. Intergenerational narratives are stories that parents and grandparents share with their children about their own past experiences growing up. And they found that sharing intergenerational narrative plays an important role in the family storytelling process that serves many functions for the elder generations who tell them and the younger generations who hear them. A lot of times we think about the benefits of the younger generation or the children that we're telling these family stories to, but it actually is benefiting the people who are telling them just as much. It's benefiting everyone involved, the listener and the teller. Okay, so let's pause here one more time before the end and just see if anybody has any questions or comments.
So Carla shared a wonderful story. She said, when our daughter was in 2nd grade, they were asked to write about a family tradition. We lived in a different state than all the other family members. She refused to do the assignment, and her teacher contacted me because it was such unusual behavior for her. She didn't realize that so much of what we did were traditions from family. It was a wake-up call and a huge incentive for us to share.
Wow, thank you. That's great.
So Allison's asking, Shenley, how detailed should they be in sharing tough times?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I think that it's important to know what happened and know what is how you got through it and how you've learned from it, because that part of the story is helping them to realize that they can get through hard things and they can come out of it and overcome it. And so I think that it's, as far as sharing stories goes, you want to keep it age appropriate, obviously. It's important, not to tell too much too younger, but not too little, so as people, as your family members grow up, there may be different things that you feel is the right time to share different parts of difficult experiences. You there, Diane? Okay. Well, I will move on.
I'm just trying to keep my microphone off since I've got so much feedback. So yeah, just keep going.
No worries. Go ahead. Was there anything else you wanted to share, or should I move on?
Go ahead.
Okay, so the next study, the last study that we're going to talk about, which is really a powerful, really interesting study that I found recently. It was done in Europe. It was done by Peter Fisher, Ann Sauer, Claudia Vagrinsek, and Silke Weisweiler. And they were all at various universities in Europe. And their study was called The Ancestor Effect. Thinking about our genetic origin enhances intellectual performance. So what she found, they did a really, really neat study, and it was done at the University of Cologne in Germany. So they divided a group of 80 students into thirds. 1/3 was, they had them think about an ancestor from the 15th century. Another third, they had them think about their great-grandparents. And the last third, they had them think about their last visit to the supermarket. And they wanted to find if there was anything different that they found, if they were the people who thought about their ancestors or their grandparents were able to be more successful, or perceived that they would be more successful at intellectual performance. So let me go into that a little deeper. So they had the first third, the group that where they thought about an ancestor from the 15th century, they had them all in a room. And what they said was, please imagine your ancestors in the 15th century. That is your great, 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 and so on grandparents. Please imagine what they did at that time, how they lived, what their profession was, and how many children they had, etc. Please also imagine what your ancestors from that time would tell you today, if you were still able to meet them. Please think about that until the experimenter gives you a sign. So they went on to the second group, which was the group that thought about their great-grandparents, and they told them the same thing, except for they added great-grandparents instead of ancestor from the 15th century. The last group, they had them think about their last visit to the supermarket, and they had them think about what they bought and how they felt about it. In all of these groups, they were given 5 minutes to think about their assigned topic. Next, they were given a survey of what they expected their intellectual performance would be. So on a scale of 0 to 10, they would fill out answers to questions, 0 being not at all and 10 being very much. And they were questions such as, how well do you think you will perform in the final social psychology exam? How well do you think you will perform in your studies? And do you think you will reach your career goals? So like I said, these were expected, how much they expected their intellectual performance to be. So what they found was that those who were in the groups that thought about their 15th century ancestor or their great-grandparents reported significantly higher academic performance expectations than those who had just thought about their trip to the supermarket. The second part of this study was they wanted to actually do an intelligence test to see if they actually would perform better after thinking about ancestors. So this study divided them into 2 groups. And the first group, they drew their own family tree. And the second group wrote a few sentences about their last shopping trip. And both groups, after the 5 minutes, were given a wild intelligence test. That's WILDE intelligence test. And they had 4 minutes to answer various questions. So what that showed, it also showed that their actual performance on the intelligence test was higher in the group that had previously thought about their ancestors. It's so amazing because all they had to do was think about them for 5 minutes and they performed better. The next part of the study was to see whether it would matter if they had met the ancestor or not. So they saw if it mattered, if it was a parent or grandparent that they were thinking about or an ancestor that they had never met. And there was no difference. both of them had the same positive intellectual results, whether they thought about their parents and grandparents or whether they thought about ancestors they had never met. The fourth part of the study was to see if it mattered whether the stories that they thought about their ancestors or their families were positive or negative. So half of them had thought about positive stories, half of them thought about negative stories. And what they found was fascinating is that it didn't matter if they had thought about positive or negative family stories. They all had the same positive intellectual test results, no matter if it was a positive story or a negative story. So this is showing us that family stories, no matter what they are important. Okay, so their conclusion was thinking about one's genetic origin provides people with a positive psychological resource that increases their intellectual performance. So this is not to say that just by doing family history, we're going to be smarter. It's showing that you will do better intellectually on your intellectual performance than you would otherwise. Okay. So I just thought that was such an incredible study. All right. So a lot of times when we do family history, we're thinking about dates, places, and names of people so we can build our trees, right? And then I was recently talking to my husband, and he gave me this really incredible insight. He said to me that as he's been doing family history lately, his question has changed. So he had always thought, what are their names? What are their dates? What are their places? And trying to piece things together. But what he started to ask was, what is my story? So he would approach doing research with what is my story? Because his story is a result of his ancestors' stories. And so he finds that when he is able to piece together the stories of his ancestors, it helps him to figure out what his own personal story is in a deeper way. So finding the stories of our ancestors is really important. So think about it from this perspective. If we were in a play, say we're in the second act of a play. Right now, you're in the second act of your play, and you don't know what happened in the first act. It would be really hard to know what was going on and to understand your role in the play. The first act of your play is the people that came before you. It's your ancestors. And as we understand what happened in their lives, we can better understand what's going on in our lives and how things are the way they are. And then we can push it even further and say the third act of the play. Imagine our posterity and how being in the third act and they don't know what the first and second act were. It's really important for us to know what happened before in our play. And as we find our family stories, we will piece together and make more sense of what's happening in our lives right now. I know that we talked a little bit about negative family stories, and there is a resource that I want to tell you about. There was a TED Talk done by Dr. Judith Landau. Judith is Judith. Landau is Landau. And her TED Talk really addressed trauma and negative stories in families. And the TED Talk is titled Family Stories, Secrets and Survival. So if you have had negative family stories passed down or experienced trauma yourself, this would be a really great resource to go and watch and see how it could affect you with your family history and processing. Okay, so I would learn about your family stories as much as possible. The benefits that we've talked about are right here. There's so many benefits. So I'm not going to actually read them all off because we've talked about them as we've gone through these studies. But once again, I'm going to talk about resilience. And resilience is the psychological strength to cope with stress and hardship. And that is the theme that in family history studies of ways that we can be helped. That's a really big issue right now, especially with what's going on in the world. And I want to be resilient. I want my children to be resilient. I want my family and my friends to be resilient. But it's not something that just comes from a pandemic that will need resilience. It's any difficult experience, and we're all going to face difficult experiences. So I'd imagine that these studies are confirming a lot of the benefits that you have already felt from doing genealogy or family history. And you may be asking, how can I help my children or other people who are important to me receive these benefits? How can I help them love family history like I do? And that's exactly what we do at Inspire Family History. We give you the tools, the ideas, and the resources to inspire children of all ages to love family history. So I would encourage you to go check it out, to go look at the ideas, to go look at the articles. And there's even more studies that I have on there under the articles. And there's resources, other companies that are already that are promoting family history is under the resources. So you'll find a lot of tools and ideas to inspire others to love family history. And there is even an Inspire Others tab where I share 3 keys to inspiring others. A lot of times we want to share family history and get other people excited, but we don't know how. And if you go and you look at those keys, you'll have the tools that you need to choose the idea that will be most likely successful in inspiring others to love family history. You can also go to inspirefamilyhistory.com/blog, and the most recent blog post has the studies that I talked about today, and you can click on a link to the actual study if you want to further look into this. You can also follow Inspire Family History on Facebook and Instagram, and we'll regularly post new ideas and new resources or articles that have been posted, that have been published about family history. So I'd encourage you to do that. So one of the resources that is on there is a company called Celebrate DNA. And I know most of you, if you're listening in on the Your DNA Guide, most of you have, or a lot of you have done your DNA test. So I have a coupon here for you that you can get 10% off on a customized t-shirt, mug, tote bag with your DNA results if you go to Celebrate DNA and use the coupon code INSPIRE101. Diane shared with me that on her webinars, she does a free giveaway, and I'm going to do that today for you. We're going to give away a DNA shirt from Celebrate DNA, and you can get your own customized DNA results on this shirt. So Diane, if you could go ahead and choose someone that you'd like to give that shirt to.
Okay, here we go. We're going to randomly choose from our list of attendees. And the winner is Rebecca Sanders. Rebecca Sanders.
Great.
So we will be reaching out to you with how to redeem that.
Yes. Congratulations, Rebecca. We hope you really like your shirt, but everyone who's listening can also use this 10% off coupon if you want to get your own DNA shirt. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. I have really enjoyed sharing this with you, and I hope that you have enjoyed learning it.